My son died 20 years ago. I stood over his grave for 2 decades. Then, last month at 2:47 the morning, his name lit up my phone. I was half asleep when the ring pulled me upright in bed. The room was dark. The only light came from the screen in my hand. On it was one word I had not seen on an incoming call in 20 years. Michael. Not a similar number. Not a private caller. It was his old number. The one I had kept in my contacts because deleting it felt like losing him twice. I stared at it while my heart slammed against my ribs. The phone kept ringing. Then I answered. For a moment there was only silence. Then I heard breathing. Slow, unsteady, human. And then a voice said, "Dad?" I stopped breathing. It was my son's voice. Older, rougher, but his. When you hear your child every day for 19 years, that voice stays in you. I tried to speak, but my mouth would not work. "Dad, are you there?" he asked again. I forced air into my lungs. "Michael?" A long pause followed. Then he said very quietly, "Yeah, it's me." Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "Dad, where am I?" If you've ever had one phone call turn your blood cold, stay with me for this. I switched on the lamp beside my bed. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Where are you calling from?" "I don't know," he said. "Something's wrong. Nothing makes sense. I found a phone. Your number was the only one I could remember." He sounded afraid. Not dramatic, just plain afraid. I got out of bed too fast and had to steady myself against the nightstand. "Michael," I said, "tell me what you can see." Silence. Then a hallway, apartment doors, bad lights. "I think I'm in a building." "What building?" "I don't know." "Can you find an address?" "I'll try." Then he stopped talking. I heard footsteps, a door opening. Then the line went dead. I looked at the screen. The call had lasted 9 minutes and 43 seconds. I called back immediately. The recorded message came on at once. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." I called again. Same message. Again. Same message. I sat on the edge of my bed until dawn with the phone in my hand. 20 years earlier, on a Friday night in November, the police had called to tell me there had been an accident. A truck had run a red light and hit my son's car. The officer told me to come to County General Hospital right away. I knew before I got there. At the hospital, they led me into a private room. I remember the clock on the wall. I remember the smell of disinfectant. I remember thinking my life had already split into a before and an after. They let me see him. His face looked peaceful. That is what haunted me for years. Not violence. Peace. I touched his hand, and it still held a trace of warmth. For 2 hours I stood there waiting for his chest to rise. It never did. His mother came later. She collapsed before she reached the bed. After that, I did everything myself. Papers, burial plot, casket, flowers, obituary. The funeral lasted less than an hour. I barely heard a word. I watched the casket go down. I stayed after everyone left because I needed to see the last shovel of dirt fall. For 20 years I visited that grave every Sunday. Rain or snow, heat or wind, I went. I spoke to him there. I told him small things. His mother stopped going after the first year. 3 years later our marriage ended. Grief hollowed us out until there was nothing left to hold together. I kept Michael's room as it was. His books remained on the shelf. His jacket stayed in the closet, and his old number stayed in my phone. People told me it was unhealthy. They said, "David, you have to let him go." I used to answer, "He's already gone." After that first call, I drove to Riverside Cemetery at sunrise. Fog sat low over the grass. The oak tree above Michael's grave looked the same as it always had. Gray headstone, damp earth, fresh flowers from my last visit. Nothing disturbed. I knelt and touched the ground. "Michael," I said quietly, "if that was you, do it again." Nothing happened. I checked my call log again. The entry was still there. Michael, 2:47 a.m., 9 minutes and 43 seconds. Not a dream. Something real had reached me. I went home and waited. That first day I did not eat. The second day I drank coffee and forgot to touch it. On the third day my neighbor, Walt, knocked on my front door around noon. "David?" he called. "You all right in there?" I stayed still until I heard him walk away. By then I had begun carrying my phone from room to room. Every hour I looked again at the call log just to prove to myself it had happened. And if part of you thinks you would have answered too, I understand. On the fourth night, at 3:15 a.m., the phone rang again. His name filled the screen. I answered before the first ring had finished. Michael. Dad. His voice came through in a rush. I found something. I found an address. I grabbed the pen and envelope I had kept on the coffee table for exactly this moment. Tell me. He read it slowly. 4247 Riverside Avenue, Apartment 8, Moorfield, West Virginia. I wrote each word twice to make sure I would not misread my own hand. That's 2 states away, I said. Why are you there? I don't know. Then how did you get there? I don't know that either. His breathing shook in my ear. Are you hurt? I asked. No. Are you alone? I think so. You think so? I hear people sometimes, but when I go near them, they don't see me. That sentence chilled me more than the first call had. What do you mean? I mean, they look right through me, like I'm not even there. He swallowed hard. Dad, I think something is very wrong with me. Stay where you are, I said. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming. You can find me? I'll find you. He let out a breath that sounded almost like a child trying not to cry. Please hurry. I will. Dad? Yes? I'm scared. I know, I said. So am I. The line went dead again. This time I did not waste a second calling back. I knew what I would hear. Instead, I stood up, grabbed a duffel bag, and started throwing clothes into it. At 4 a.m., before I left, I called the phone company. A woman answered. I gave her the number and told her I needed to confirm recent activity. She was quiet for a moment. Sir, that number has been inactive for many years. I know that. There are no outgoing calls on record. There have been 2 calls to my phone in 4 days. A longer pause. Keys clicking. Then, no sir, I'm not seeing any such activity. Check again. She put me on hold. A man came on a few minutes later. Mr. Porter, I have reviewed the account history personally. The number in question was disconnected in March of 2006. There is no recent usage. I have the call log in front of me. Sometimes caller display errors. This was my son's number, I said. I know it. Another pause. Then he said, Mr. Porter, have you spoken to anyone about your grief? I hung up on him. I took screenshots of the call log. Then I took a video of my phone showing the time, date, and entries. If this ended with me being called unstable, I wanted proof in my hand. At 4:25 a.m., I got in my truck and started driving toward West Virginia. The whole way there, I repeated the address out loud. 4247 Riverside Avenue, Apartment 8. My son died 20 years ago. So why did his number call me last month? I had no answer, but I was going to that address until I found one. If you need the truth as badly as I did, keep going. I drove straight through except for gas and 1 cup of coffee I never finished. By the time I reached Moorfield, it was late morning. The town looked ordinary. Nothing about it suggested that a dead boy's phone number had led me there. The GPS took me to the east side of town. When I turned onto Riverside Avenue, my stomach tightened. The street ended near an overgrown lot and an old brick apartment building behind a chain-link fence. The sign on the fence read condemned, no trespassing, demolition pending. I parked across the street and stared. The first-floor windows were boarded. The front entrance was wrapped in chain and a rusted padlock. Weeds had pushed up through cracked pavement. I checked the paper in my hand. 4247 Riverside Avenue, Apartment 8. It matched. I sat there for almost 10 minutes, watching for any movement. Nothing. Then I got out. The fence had been cut in more than one place. I slipped through a gap and crossed toward the building. The front door would not open, but around back I found a side entrance hanging off a broken frame. I pushed it inward with 2 fingers. The smell hit first. Damp carpet, mold, rot. I turned on my phone flashlight and stepped inside. The hallway was long and stained. Wallpaper peeled away in strips. Apartment doors on the first floor stood open or crooked on damaged hinges. Trash lay in corners. Nothing about the place suggested someone had lived there recently. I moved room by room, checking numbers. Apartment 1, empty. Apartment 2, broken furniture. Apartment 3, mattress on the floor. At the stairwell, I stopped and listened. Silence. I climbed to the second floor. More of the same. Rot, stains, cracked glass, old newspapers. Then I climbed to the third floor. Apartment 8 sat at the end of the hallway, and something changed the moment I saw it. Unlike every other unit in the building, this door was closed. Fully closed. The brass number 8 was straight and polished. The paint on the frame looked fresh. Even the knob seemed cleaner than anything else in that hallway. I stood there with my light on the handle and felt every instinct tell me to leave. Instead, I opened the door. Inside was a clean, fully lived-in apartment. The air smelled like soap and coffee. The walls were painted a pale blue. The carpet was vacuumed. There was a couch, a lamp, a television, framed pictures, a folded blanket over one armrest. It looked like someone had gone out and might return any minute. Then I noticed the photographs. They were on the wall across from the couch. Family pictures. I moved closer and my knees nearly gave way. There I was, 20 years younger, standing with my ex-wife and Michael at Christmas. Another showed Michael at 10, holding a bicycle helmet too big for his head. Another had him in a cap and gown, smiling into the sun. These were our photographs. Then I looked farther down the wall and felt something colder than fear. More photographs hung there. Only these were impossible. In one, Michael stood outside a college building wearing a graduation gown I had never seen. In another, he sat in a restaurant booth with two men I did not know. In another, he stood in front of this very building with his hands in his pockets, smiling. Only he was not 19 in these pictures. He was older. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of every frame. "Michael?" I said out loud. No answer. I walked into the kitchen. Clean dishes sat in a drying rack. A mug with coffee residue stood beside the sink. The refrigerator held milk, eggs, leftovers, sliced bread. I checked the date on the milk. Fresh. Someone lived here. Then I noticed the note on the refrigerator. It was held by a magnet shaped like a red apple. The paper was lined, folded once, and covered in a handwriting I knew before I touched it. Michael's. I took the paper down and read, "Dad, if you're reading this, I don't know what's happening to me." I leaned one hand against the counter and kept reading. The note said he had woken up there 3 weeks earlier with memories that did not match the life around him. His identification said he was Marcus Powell, 38 years old. He had a job, bills, a routine, an apartment, but none of it felt like his. He remembered the accident. He remembered being Michael. He remembered me. He remembered dying. He wrote, "Please help me figure out what happened." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and slipped it into my pocket. I went to the bedroom. The bed was made. A dresser held a wallet, a set of keys, and more framed photographs. The closet held men's clothes in my son's general size. The nightstand had a paperback novel, a cheap lamp, and a bottle of aspirin. I picked up the wallet and opened it. Inside was a driver's license. The photo showed a man in his late 30s. Same eyes, same nose, same mouth, same small scar under the chin from when Michael had fallen off his bike at 7. But the name read Marcus James Powell. Date of birth, the 12th of April, 1986. Michael's birthday. I sat down on the edge of the bed because my legs would not hold me up. For the next 2 hours I searched the apartment. I found utility bills addressed to Marcus Powell, pay stubs from Moorfield Manufacturing, a lease agreement, a stack of grocery receipts. In another drawer I found medical papers, old appointment summaries, prescription slips, neurology visits. I sat on the living room floor with the file in my lap and began to read. According to the records, a man later identified as Marcus Powell had been admitted to County General Hospital on the 3rd of November 2005 after a serious motor vehicle collision. He had suffered severe head trauma and remained in a coma for 6 days. When he woke, he had no memory of his identity. No identification had been found with him. Social services had assisted after discharge. Over time, he had been documented as an amnesia patient with long-term identity loss. The 3rd of November 2005, the same night Michael died, there was a business card clipped to the back of the file. Dr. Sarah Chen, Neurology, County General Hospital. I called immediately. The receptionist sounded young and efficient. "I need to speak with Dr. Chen," I said. "What is this regarding?" "A case from 20 years ago. Dr. Chen does not normally discuss former cases by phone. It concerns my son's death," I said. She placed me on hold. When Dr. Chen came on the line, her tone was measured. "This is Dr. Chen. My name is David Porter," I said. "My son, Michael Porter, was declared dead at County General Hospital on November 3rd, 2005. I am sitting in an apartment in West Virginia looking at medical records for a man named Marcus Powell, who appears to have been admitted to your hospital that same night after a major accident. I need to know exactly what happened." Silence. "Mr. Porter," she said finally, "what you are describing is highly unusual. So was my son calling me from a disconnected number." Another pause. "What exactly do you believe has happened?" "I don't know. I said. That's why I'm calling you. I told her enough to make clear I was not playing a game. When I mentioned the date again, her voice changed slightly. I do remember an amnesia case from that period, she said. A John Doe, severe trauma, no identification. Was he brought in from the same accident? I would have to review the archived files. Then review them. Mr. Porter records that old are not instantly available. My son has been dead for 20 years, I said. Or maybe he hasn't. You tell me how patient you would be. She did not answer right away. Then she said, give me until tomorrow. I will pull what I can. Doctor. Yes? If you find something, don't call me back with half of it. Her voice lowered. If I find something, I will tell you. I stayed in that apartment that night. I sat on the couch with the note in one hand and the driver's license in the other. At one point I found myself speaking into the empty room. Why didn't you call sooner? There was no answer. If this sounds impossible, don't leave me yet. At 9:23 the next morning, my phone lit up with 6 missed calls from Dr. Chen. I called back at once. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Porter, she said, and I heard strain in her voice. I found something. You need to come to the hospital. Stay with me, because the records changed everything. County General looked smaller than I remembered, though that may have been because I had carried it in my head for so long as the building where my life ended. Dr. Chen met me near the elevators. Mr. Porter? Yes, come with me. She led me to a small office on the 3rd floor. There were 2 folders on the desk, and a laptop open beside them. I spent most of the night in archives, she said. What I found raises serious questions. She opened the first file. On November 3, 2005, 2 critical trauma patients were brought to this hospital from the same intersection within minutes of each other. I felt my chest tighten. 2? Yes. She slid one record toward me. Patient A arrived at 11:52 p.m., massive trauma, pronounced dead shortly after midnight. The name at the top was Michael James Porter, my son. Patient B arrived at 11:58 p.m., severe head injury, emergency surgery, coma, for 6 days, survived. No identification on his person. He was entered as John Doe until social services established a legal identity after discharge. She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen were 2 photographs. One was an intake image from 2005. The other was the driver's license photograph from the apartment. The man in both was the same, and the younger version looked like my son. That's Michael, I said. Dr. Chen folded her hands. That is the patient later known as Marcus Powell. That's my son. She opened another document. The police report from that night references one collision at the Riverside and Grant intersection. A truck struck a sedan. The sedan driver was listed as Michael Porter, based on identification found in the vehicle. I stared at her. Then why were there 2 patients from the same site? That is exactly the problem. She pulled another page free and set it down. Emergency intake notes were made during a very chaotic period. Several trauma cases arrived within the same hour. Some of the initial documentation is incomplete. Some timestamps were corrected by hand later. There are discrepancies. What kind? Chain of identification, early labeling, transfer notes. There are places where certainty appears before verification. I sat back and looked at the wall for a second. You're telling me the hospital may have confused 2 young men the same night I identified my son. I'm telling you there were failures in documentation that night, she said. Is there anything objective? Fingerprints, dental records. The deceased patient was processed under your son's name after family confirmation and scene identification. The surviving patient had no verified identity. Fingerprints were taken eventually, but there was nothing to match them to at the time, so the living one disappeared into paperwork. In effect, yes. She reached for a small packet on the desk and pushed it toward me. A DNA collection kit. If Marcus Powell is willing, we can compare his sample to yours. I picked it up. Will that tell us for certain? Yes. How long? 48 hours, perhaps less. Do you know where he is now? She hesitated, then wrote on a sheet of paper and handed it to me. Moorfield Manufacturing, night shift, 11 p.m. But listen to me carefully. If this man is your son, he has lived 20 years under another identity. He may not remember you. He may not want what you want. He called me. Dr. Chen's eyes lifted. Then perhaps some part of him is already looking for the truth. I drove back to Moorfield with the address in my pocket and a feeling I cannot compare to anything else. Relief was in there somewhere. Rage too. Hope, yes. But hope under those conditions feels dangerous. I reached the factory a little before 11. Moorfield Manufacturing sat on the edge of town. Metal siding, bright floodlights. Workers trickled in carrying lunch pails, plastic coffee cups, backpacks. I stayed in my truck and watched. At 10:52, a silver Honda pulled into the lot 3 spaces away. The driver stepped out. Even before I saw his face, something in the way he moved struck me. A slight forward lean, one shoulder lower than the other. Michael used to walk like that when he was tired. The man shut the car door, slung a backpack over one shoulder, and headed toward the entrance. He passed under the overhead lights. I forgot how to breathe. He was older. There were lines near the eyes. The jaw was more settled, but it was him. The face I had imagined for 20 years whenever I caught myself wondering what Michael would have looked like at 38. He went inside before I could move. I sat with both hands locked on the steering wheel and cried. My son was alive enough to clock in for work. If you were in my place, you would have kept walking too. I waited 3 hours. When the brake doors opened and workers came out smoking and stretching, I saw him again. He walked away from the others to the far side of the fence line where the floodlights reached, but the conversation did not. I got out of the truck and started toward him. When I was about 20 feet away, he turned. Our eyes met. His expression changed at once. Not recognition exactly. More like the shock of seeing a face from a dream. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was deeper now, rougher, but it was still my son's voice. For a second, I could not answer. He took a small step toward me. "Sir, I'm sorry," I said. You look like someone I used to know." He studied my face more closely. "That's strange," he said. "You look familiar too. We haven't met." "Maybe not. Still feels like I know you." "What's your name?" I asked. "Marcus," he said. Then, after the shortest pause, "Marcus Powell." "I'm John," I lied. He rubbed the back of his neck. "This is going to sound stupid. Try me. I've been having strange dreams lately, about a life that feels like mine except it isn't. Different house, different people, different name." My chest tightened. "What name?" He looked toward the factory doors and then back at me. "A father, a house, a cemetery, and a name. Michael." I felt the world shift under me. "Michael?" I repeated. He stared at me. "How did you react like that?" I asked. "In those dreams, the father, does he look like me?" Marcus went still. "Yes," he said carefully, "exactly like you." We stood there in the factory light with all the sound of the night shift moving around us and something far larger happening between us than either of us could yet name aloud. "Who are you really?" he asked. I had promised myself I would move slowly. Then he looked at me with Michael's eyes and I knew slow was over. "I'm a man who lost his son 20 years ago," I said. His face changed. "What was his name?" he asked. I held his gaze. "Michael." He inhaled sharply. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Why?" He pulled out his phone with shaking fingers and opened a note. Then he turned the screen toward me. 3 words covered it, typed over and over. "I am Michael. I am Michael. I am Michael." His hand shook as he held the phone. I woke up and found this written in my notes app. I don't remember typing it. I reached into my pocket and took out the DNA kit. "I need to ask you for something," I said. He stared at the kit, then at me. "What is that?" "A cheek swab." "What for?" "Because I believe your name is Michael Porter," I said, "and I believe I'm your father." He looked at me as if I had split the air open. Around us, men laughed near the loading dock. A truck reversed. The whole ordinary world went on while his face emptied and filled again with confusion, fear, anger, and something else. "Hope." "You're serious," he said. "Yes." "How?" So I told him. The calls, the apartment, the note on the refrigerator, the records from the hospital, the date of the accident, the grave I had visited for 20 years. At one point he whispered, "No." At another he said, "That can't be true." I answered him with the only thing I had left. "Then prove me wrong." He looked at the swab for a long time. Then he nodded once. "All right." I opened the package. "Open your mouth," I said softly. He did. I swabbed the inside of his cheek and sealed the tube. "How long?" he asked. "A day or 2. He wrapped his arms around himself. "And if it comes back positive, then we know the truth." "That's not what I asked." His eyes stayed on mine. "If it comes back positive, what happens to the man I've been for 20 years?" "We take one step at a time," I said. He gave a sad little shake of the head. That sounds like something people say when there isn't a real answer. Maybe. He looked away. If I'm him, if I'm Michael, I don't remember being him. I know. I don't remember you. I know that too. He nodded. Then, unexpectedly, he touched my shoulder for just a second. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For whatever you lived through, whether I'm him or not. Then he turned and went back inside. I stood there in the parking lot holding the sample tube in one hand and feeling, for the first time in 20 years, that grief had opened a door instead of closing one. Keep going with me. The next call decided everything. I drove the sample straight back to County General before dawn. Dr. Chen met me in a side office near the lab. She took one look at my face and knew I had found him. You saw Marcus, she said. I saw my son. She took the tube from my hand and labeled it with careful precision. I'll push this through myself, she said. Go somewhere and wait where I can reach you. I'm staying in the apartment. I spent the next 2 days in a state that was not sleep and not wakefulness. I paced. Saturday stood at the window. Read the note again. Looked through the photographs again. Opened drawers I had already opened. On the afternoon of the second day, my phone rang. Dr. Chen. For 3 rings I could not answer. Then I did. Mr. Porter, she said. The results are in. I sat down on the couch without deciding to. Tell me. A breath. Then, it's a match. Everything in me went quiet. Marcus Powell is your biological son. I looked at the family pictures on the wall and thought, he was alive while I stood at a grave and spoke into the dirt. Dr. Chen kept talking. Official report, chain of custody, next steps, investigation. Finally, I said, so the dead boy we buried wasn't mine. No, she said softly. It appears he was not. I pressed my thumb and forefinger into my eyes hard enough to hurt. Who was he? We are still working on that. No, I said. That doesn't wait. He had a name. After we hung up, I sat for nearly an hour without moving. Relief is not clean when it arrives that late. It drags guilt with it. Rage, wonder, a terrible inventory of lost birthdays, lost conversations, lost years. I did not get my son back at 19. I got proof that he had been alive all that time without me. Then I called him. He answered on the first ring. Hello? It's positive, I said. Silence. The DNA test, it's positive, you're my son. The silence held, then broke into sobbing. He did not try to hide it. Neither did I. After a while he said, I don't know what to do. Neither do I. I don't know how to be him. You don't have to become anyone today. We agreed to meet at a diner near the highway in 2 hours. I got there early and took a booth by the window. The waitress filled my coffee twice before I touched it. When he walked in, time did something strange. For 1 second I saw the boy I lost overlaid on the man he had become. Same eyes. Same way of scanning a room first and deciding where to land. He slid into the booth across from me. Neither of us spoke right away. Finally he said, Do I call you Dad? That question cut deeper than anything else had. You call me whatever you can manage, I said. He nodded, looking down at the table. I've spent 20 years not knowing who I was. Then in 2 days I get a father, a grave, a dead name, and a whole missing life. It's too much. Yes, he gave a broken little laugh. That might be the first true thing anyone has said. Then he asked, Tell me about him. About who? About Michael. I looked at him for a long second before answering. You. He shook his head gently. I need to hear it as a story first. I can't wear it all at once. So I told him. I told him about the day he insisted on sleeping in cowboy boots at age 4. About the time he broke his arm falling out of a tree and was more upset about missing baseball than about the pain. About his habit of leaving cabinet doors open in the kitchen. About how he chewed the inside of his cheek when he was trying not to argue. About the bike accident that left the scar on his chin. About his laugh before life made him careful. At certain details he went very still. Say that again, he said once. The cheek thing? He pressed his tongue against one side of his mouth without thinking. We both noticed. Another time he said, I hate pickles. You always hated pickles. He stared at me. There's a jar of them in my fridge. I bought them last week because I keep wanting things that don't fit me anymore. We sat there for 4 hours. By the end, he had asked for photographs. He asked what his room looked like. I told him I had never changed it. He closed his eyes at that. Halfway through the meal, he leaned back and said the thing I had been dreading. If I'm Michael biologically, and if I was Michael once, I'm still also Marcus. I have a job, coworkers, bills, a lease, a life. I know. I can't wake up tomorrow and walk away from 20 years. I'm not asking you to. His eyes searched mine. All I said was, I lost a son. I'm not going to lose a man by forcing him into a shape that no longer fits. He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. That matters, he said quietly. He asked about his mother. I told him the truth. Divorced 3 years after the funeral. Remarried. Another child. A different life. He nodded once and stared out the window. I'm not ready for that. You don't have to be. Before we left, he said, Can I ask you something ugly? Yes. Do you hate the hospital? I considered lying. No, I said. I'm past hate. What is it then? Anger with nowhere clean to go. He looked at me a long time. I feel that. We stepped outside into late afternoon light. In the parking lot, he stood awkwardly, hands in his jacket pockets. I opened my arms a little and let him choose. He did. The hug was brief, stiff at first. Then he held on 1 second longer than I expected. That single second was enough. Over the next few weeks, we met again and again. At first, only in neutral places. The diner, a park bench, the apartment. Then, one Sunday, I asked if he wanted to come with me somewhere. Where? The cemetery. He went pale. I don't know if I can. You don't have to. He sat with that for a while, then said no. I should. At Riverside Cemetery, under the oak tree. He stood beside the headstone that bore his name and did not speak for a long time. Finally, he said, I've had dreams of this place. I nodded. He reached down and touched the stone with his fingertips. You came here every week? Every Sunday? For 20 years? Yes. He swallowed hard. I don't know what to do with that. You don't need to do anything with it. He looked at me with pain so open in his face I had to look away first. If I had remembered sooner. You didn't choose this. That day, after he left, I made another call. To the cemetery office. Then to Dr. Chen. Then to the authorities who handled exhumations and identity verification. Because the boy in that grave had not been my son. And whatever mistakes the living had made, the dead deserved their own names back. Weeks later, the buried remains were tested. The body belonged to a 19-year-old named Christopher Hayes, a runaway with almost no family record. We had his remains moved. Proper records, proper marker, proper name. It did not undo the wrong. But it ended one part of it. If you've made it this far, stay for what came after. And if you've ever wondered whether love can wait that long, this is the part that answered me. 3 months after the DNA results, Michael came to my house for the first time. I still remember the way he stood on the porch before knocking, as if he needed one full breath before crossing from the life he knew into the life that should have been his all along. When I opened the door, he gave me a small, uncertain nod. Hey, come in. He stepped inside slowly. Then he looked down the hallway, and something moved across his face. You painted this wall, he said. I stared. What? This one. He touched the hallway wall with the back of his fingers. Blue. It feels familiar. I swallowed. You helped me paint it when you were 15. You got more paint on yourself than on the wall. He closed his eyes briefly, like he was listening for something deep underwater. Then I took him to his room. I had not changed it. Not really. I dusted. I vacuumed. But the posters, shelves, yearbooks, baseball glove, stack of paperbacks, all of it remained where he had left it. He stood in the doorway for a long time. It feels... He stopped. What? Like a museum, he said, but not a cold one. More like a room someone kept warm in case I came back. That nearly finished me. I didn't know what else to do, I said. He walked in slowly, picked up a photo frame from the dresser, touched the old baseball glove, opened the closet, ran his hand over shirts that had not fit him in 2 decades. Then he turned back to me. You really believed I was dead? Every word in that sentence mattered. Yes. And you still kept all this? Yes. He looked around again and whispered, That's love I don't know how to deserve. It isn't earned, I said. It's yours. For the first time since we found each other, he let me see anger without apology. At them? He asked. At everyone. Good, he said, and his voice shook. Because sometimes I feel like I'm supposed to be grateful to be alive, and I am. But I'm also furious. I lost 20 years. You lost 20 years. Christopher Hayes was buried under the wrong name. How is anyone supposed to call that a mistake and move on? I nodded slowly. That's the right question. We sat in the living room after that and went through old photo albums one by one. At first he treated them like evidence. Then, over time, like windows. Sometimes a detail would snag him. The shape of the old kitchen table. A camping photo. The pattern on his childhood blanket. Once he laughed without warning at a picture of himself at 8 missing both front teeth. "I know that laugh," he said. "What laugh?" "That one." He pointed at the photo, then at himself. "I can hear how I used to laugh there." It was one of the first times he said "I," without splitting himself into Michael and Marcus. Over the next few months we made habits. Sunday breakfast at the diner, a midweek phone call, one evening a week at my house, or his, depending on the shift schedule. He still worked at the factory for a while. He still paid rent on the apartment. He still answered to Marcus at work because untangling legal identity takes more than a revelation and a DNA test. I still called him Michael in private only after he told me I could. The first time I said it directly to him, he looked up from his coffee and just held my gaze. "Say it again," he said. "Michael." He nodded once, tears standing in his eyes. "That sounds right now." There were hard days, too. One afternoon he snapped at me when I asked too many questions about his therapy appointments. I snapped back. He left angry. The next morning he called and said, "I'm not 19, and I'm not trying to disappear. I just need room." "You're right," I said. Then I added, "I'm still learning how to have you alive." After a long silence, he said, "I'm still learning how to be alive as me too." He did not rush to see his mother. I never forced it. He asked about her now and then, about her health, her life, whether she still liked lilacs. The calls from his old number never came again. Not once. Maybe there is an explanation. Maybe there is not. I no longer spend much energy on that question. The calls did what they came to do. They led a lost son back to a father who never stopped waiting. About a year after the DNA test, we returned to Riverside together. This time not for the wrong grave, for Christopher Hayes. His new marker was simple. Proper name, proper dates. Michael stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the grave for a long time. "He should have had someone," he said. "Yes, maybe he does now." I looked at him then. Maybe he does. We left flowers there before going to the oak tree where my son's old headstone had once stood. The cemetery had corrected the records. The stone was gone. In its place was only grass, new and level. Michael looked at the empty patch and said, almost to himself, "You stood here every week." "Yes, I keep trying to imagine that." "You don't need to." He faced me. "No, I do. Because that's where you were when I wasn't." Then he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You didn't lose me twice, Dad. You kept finding me in the only place you were told I could be." No one had ever given my grief that kind of mercy before. Later that afternoon he came back to my house and stayed through dinner. Nothing dramatic. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, the same kind of ordinary meal we used to eat before Friday football games in high school. At one point he looked around the table and smiled in that quiet, sideways way he had at 17. "What?" I asked. He shrugged. "This is the first thing that feels fully mine." "Dinner?" "Home," he said. Life did not tie itself neatly after that. Michael never became the 19-year-old boy I buried. He could not. The man I found had a separate history, separate scars, separate reflexes shaped by 20 years of being Marcus Powell. Both things are true. My son came back, and the stranger he had to become in order to survive came back with him. I had to love them both. These days he comes by most Sundays. We talk on the porch. We argue about coffee brands. He helps me fix small things around the house. I tell him stories he asks for now by choice. Every so often a memory flashes for him. A smell, a phrase, a place. Other times nothing comes, and we let the silence stand. That is what peace looks like for us. Not certainty about every mystery, not revenge. Just truth where a lie used to be. A son where a grave used to stand. A father who finally stopped speaking only to stone. I buried my son 20 years ago. That is still true in the way grief records events, even when the paperwork was wrong. But another truth stands beside it now. Last month his number called me. And when I answered, my son was not asking to come back from death. He was asking to be found. This time, I brought him home.